Hi, Phil Bachman with ToSellYourBusiness.com. We've just finished shooting some additional videos for the course here in the studio. We've got a little bit of time left, so I wanted to make this short introductory video addressed specifically to those of you I've had the opportunity to meet and to those of you I hope to have the opportunity to meet. I thought it might help to let you know a little bit about the course and see some samples of the course content. I'm adding this introduction that I'm shooting right now to the front of a demo video I made at the request of a national professional association who's also interested in the course. The avatar or the target market for ToSellYourBusiness.com is business owners and future business owners. They may be thinking about selling their business in the near future, or they know they'll be selling it someday and haven't given it a whole lot of thought yet. When doesn't matter. The information is important to them to learn now in order to best position themselves and their businesses for when the opportunity is best for them. It'll keep them in the decision-making seat whenever the time is right to sell. So the demo is a 15-minute video of short excerpts from several of the actual training videos on a variety of topics, kind of a cross-section from the course. It's intended to give you a representative sample of some of the teaching subjects. There's a slide at the beginning and also at the end of the demo video which summarizes the makeup of the course and the materials. In our M&A, our merger and acquisition business, we subscribe to several professional slides and databases. They keep us current on what's going on in the economy and how it relates to businesses and selling businesses. So we have a steady, constant input of good, need-to-know information. So briefly, the course currently, and I say currently because we'll be constantly adding this new information into the course. So currently it contains over 15 hours of solid training in a seven-module course with 72 videos. The current syllabus for the course is on the video behind me. In putting the course together, over the past year, we've generated a great deal of materials and support documents, slides, diagrams, Excel forms, all to go with the videos. But it quickly became obvious that to attach all of these as PDFs just wouldn't work. There's over 360 pages. So I bit the bullet, and I've put together and will include as part of the course a 3-ring binder of all the documents tabbed to the individual videos they belong to. This is a mock-up here of the actual binder, and this is the actual masters that we'll be reproducing to put in the binder. And I've found out this is no small task to have all of this professionally produced. But common sense made it clear that a lot of people who will be going through this course won't have the time and in some cases may not have the resources to download everything. So I took that problem and that concern away. Okay, here's the demo video. I hope you find it interesting, and I'd really like you to tell me some of your thoughts after watching it. So let me know, and thanks for watching.
The last video, we talked about the basic valuation concept. And really, as we talked about in that previous video, it was two elements that make up valuation. Very simple when you get down to it, but now the details get a little bit more difficult, and that's why we're going to go into more details here. The very simple concepts were this, that valuation can be boiled down to EBITDA, or earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, multiplied by some multiple to give you a rough estimation of what the value is. And again, it's better for you to establish what your replacement salary is for your services, and probably better for you to establish what you think your capital expenditure budget is on a regular basis, because I can guarantee you if you don't do it, the buyer will do it for you and they'll come up with bigger numbers. So coming up with your own estimate of this and your own estimate for CapEx is usually a good thing, because it means you get to be the one to set out those numbers in the first place. So when we're done with all of this, what we end up with is the adjusted EBITDA that we're trying to arrive at. Now let me explain the basic math on this so that you can see how this works, and then we'll talk about how that operates. So if I'm a buyer and I have a 20% rate of return expectation for my business, a 20% rate of return, this is back to your basic math class. If everyone remembers, that's the same as 1 over 5. And 1 over 5 is therefore the same as a 5 multiple. If we take a 20% discount of cash flow, because that's 1 over 5, that turns into a 5 multiple. Again, simple math here. If we have a 25% rate of return expectation, that's the same as 1 over 4, which turns into a 4 multiple. So the math becomes pretty simple. And so that part we're not going to spend a whole bunch of time talking about math anymore. The real question there is, what we obviously want is we want to increase the multiple when we are having a buyer analyze the business and taking an estimate of what they think the value is. So what is it we really are trying to do is we're trying to lower that buyer's risk perspective. What we want the buyer to do is to use a lower rate of return expectation. Well, why does a buyer have a rate of return expectation at all? Well, rate of return expectation is directly related to their perception of risk. Hi there, I want to give you all a good perspective of how the marketplace for small, mid-size, and large companies works, and how many businesses there are in each of these different categories, and ultimately how that impacts value, how that impacts selling your company, and what you can do about using this information about how big the marketplace is to actually help you run your business better and ultimately get a better value when you sell it. So let me start by giving you a diagram here that shows the perspective of how many companies there are in the marketplace. And what this diagram shows is that there are roughly 5.5 million, and this is just the United States alone, about 5.5 million companies that are in the small company size range. And when we say small company, you'll see this diagram shows from 5 million in revenues. The concept of it is that there are cycles in our economy when it is appropriate to buy, when it's appropriate to sell, and when it's appropriate to hold. And so what we can see is that there are cycles that have repeated themselves over the last few decades that are pretty consistent and therefore somewhat predictable. Now, before I show you this exactly, let me tell you that this isn't always true in every industry. Of course there are outlying industries, but this is a general framework that has proven to make a lot of sense for the overall economy, and that overall those overall economic conditions make a big difference into when you decide to sell your company. So let me show you what this looks like. Over the last 10 years, over a 10-year cycle, going back into the early 80s, you'll see that there has been a very consistent cycle that almost coincides with the year, with the digit that ends the year. So for example, from 1980 to 83, from 90 to 93, from 2000 to 2003, and again from 2010, 2013, what we saw was a very consistent deal recession. Valuations were low. It was a very bad time if you're a seller, and it was a very good time if you were a buyer. Valuations in general across the board were lower in those time frames very consistently. So this will become more clear when we get into the discussion. It'll be a little easier to understand when we go through each exit channel specifically. But let's look at the chart of exit channels just to refresh your memory about what all of these options are. So we'll see here is this is the spectrum of different exit channels that you have to choose from. And no financial analysis discussion would be complete without talking about your balance sheet. So I first want to congratulate you for actually opening the video that discusses a balance sheet. Now, I know a balance sheet for a lot of business owners is uncharted territory. Business owners are very comfortable talking about their profit and loss statement, but when it comes to the balance sheet, there's either confusion or maybe folks don't really feel that it's that important. Frankly, some business owners don't even understand what their balance sheet is or how it works. But you must watch these next videos on your balance sheet if you want to maximize the amount you're going to get in your business sale transaction. Hi there. We are going to get into the meat and potatoes of selling the business. This chapter is all about the process. All about the process from starting out to get buyers interested, how to market to buyers, how to find buyers, ultimately how to close a transaction, how to sell your business. And we're going to start from the very beginning of this process. A lot of the earlier chapters that you've gone through are sort of foundational work, understanding how to value the company, how to go about looking at improving your value propositions, what type of buyer and what type of sale are you really looking at getting into. That's a lot of the foundational work, and we're going to really now drive into the process of getting started to ultimately sell and close your business. So as we start about the process, we're going to get, the first thing we really have to ask about is you, the seller, are you ready to sell? Is this the right time? And is this the right year? Have you done a lot of the preparation work that some of the earlier chapters in this presentation have talked about? Have you done some of that preparation work? Are you ready? Are you ready personally? Is your business ready? And is it the right time for the market? So that's the first step of the process. So a lot of it is industry specific, but in general, of course, we all know we went through a big recession. Transactions didn't get done during the recession. We're now coming out of that recession, and for a lot of industries, this is absolutely a seller's market. There are a lot more buyers, and there's a lot more money sitting on the sidelines than there are viable businesses for sale. So the market piece, I think, is probably ready for you. It's really those first two pieces. Are you personally ready, and is your business ready for sale? But you got to stop there if it's not. So the next step in this process is you've got to figure out who your team's going to be. Who are you going to rely on to get this transaction done? This is not a solo sport. This is absolutely a team sport, and you've got to know who the players are in that team. There are a lot of people that you can involve in the transaction, and some of them you need to involve in the transaction. So a lot of it's your choice on some of these things. A few lists that I'll throw out here show some of the players that are involved in the transaction. As I say, who's in the deal paradigm? We start with an investment banker or a broker or an intermediary. Well, that's a choice you need to make. Do you want to engage an intermediary in this transaction? Oftentimes, and we'll talk more about brokers in a minute, but brokers do more than just bring buyers to the table. A good broker, a good intermediary, or whether you call them a transaction advisor, someone that really is that quarterback of the transaction, can do a lot more than just find a buyer. They can really help you go through the process and really understand the process, and of course have done it before and have been there. And so some of that experience is very useful. From below that, there's a lot of other people in the transaction paradigm that you might be intersecting with. A lot of the advisors, of course, your accountants and attorneys, those become very necessary, especially in the later part of the transaction when we're getting to the documents and the closing process, and of course the tax filings, those sort of things. That's a necessary piece that most people are going to hire. So figuring out who they are in advance is a good idea. You need to know who's going to be on your team so that when you pick up the phone, you're not introducing yourself to them for the first time. You ought to get that team figured out, pull them together, get them to sit down with you and go over your game plan so you know who's going to be on your team. Taxes. Nobody wants to talk about them, but here's the secret. The IRS is your silent partner, and it's the unfortunate reality. They are going to get a piece of this sale price when you sell your business. So understanding how the tax laws work, learning how you can best navigate the tax law, and eventually getting to a point where you pay less taxes on this transaction, of course, is in your best interest. So I hope you take the time to watch and learn as much as you can in this section. Now, I'm a CPA by background, so this stuff comes naturally to me. You're probably not a CPA. The goal of this video series is not to make you into a tax expert. It's not to make you into a CPA, and we're not going to talk about filling out forms. What we're going to talk about are the practical things you need to know when you go to sell your business. Due diligence is the process where the buyer will investigate the seller and look at various elements of your business. For the most part, due diligence is being conducted from the moment the buyer is interested in your company all the way until closing. And due diligence isn't necessarily just a defined window of time, although there are certain elements of due diligence that can be done in those defined windows. Let's talk through due diligence both at an overall level, but then specifically some of the legal due diligence elements that are done and processes that are followed by most buyers. Well, sir, first of all, again, due diligence is one party's attempt to confirm the information that they've been told by the other party. It's pretty much that simple. In most cases, at some point after a letter of intent and during the due diligence phase, the buyer's attorneys will draft the actual purchase agreement. And for ease of description, we refer to these as either an APA or an SPA. An APA being an asset purchase agreement, an SPA being a stock purchase agreement. Again, going back to what is the overall structure of your transaction. In addition to the primary purchase agreement, asset or stock, there is going to be a few other attachments and other related documents. One of the most substantial attachments is going to be a series of schedules. And these schedules will range from disclosure schedules, meaning these are contracts and employees and other relationships that exist. And they also may be very specific disclosures to your representations and warranties, describing certain exceptions. We talked about earnouts in a previous video in the selling process section of this series. But now I'd like to talk about some of the legal elements of how earnouts are calculated, how they're documented, and some of the problems that come about from a legal standpoint when you have an earnout in your transaction. So for review, what is an earnout? Well, an earnout is essentially a contingent purchase price amount that is paid only if certain targets are met after closing. So it's essentially a buffer between the value you might want to get as the seller and the value that the buyer may want to pay at closing.